This podcast is proud to be part of the talkSPORT Fan Network. talkSPORT. Powered by fans.
Danilo's free, and he goes to Gibbs wide. Edge of the box, Foley. Yes! Great goal! What a hit from Oliveira! It's wide! They've only gone and done it again! Forest back in the lead! Road and Gibbs White! Oh, and he scores! And the City ground goes ballistic!
Hello and welcome to this episode of Red Side of the Trent. Joining me tonight are pod regulars in Lee Clark and Christian Brown, as per usual. Chaps, are we well?
Yeah,
Very well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to be with these boys. Great to be with these.
And as you can tell by that familiar voice, also joining us ahead of his roadshow and return to Nottingham is a man who manages on two separate occasions, taking us to back-to-back playoffs in his first spell in Billy Davies. Billy, thank you for giving us your time and coming on and joining us. I mean, first of all, how are things with yourself?
Yeah, very good, Reece. Obviously fit and ready to go back into football again after some very, very strange years gone by, but delighted that I'm now obviously joining you guys to talk about football and Forest, but very much looking forward to getting back on the grass and back shouting and balling at one or two players again.
We'll get to that down the line. So, yeah, well, basically, I mean, I think me and Lee, I'm not sure about Christian, we listened to Max's podcast on Garibaldi Red. We all know Max, who's a nice lad. So there will be a bit of kind of repeat from that pod for kind of flow purposes, really. But there's plenty of new questions to put to you, Billy. So we'll get straight into it. So as 2009 got underway, you became Forest manager. And you watched from the stands as we recorded that FA Cup shock at Manchester City. When you first walked into Forest, what was the morale like, and were you completely convinced you could keep the side up in the Championship, having us come up on the season before under Colin Calderwood?
Well, I wasn't getting fooled with the Manchester City result, let me tell you, because the league table doesn't lie. I mean, you sit back and you look at the league table at that point, I think Forest were third bottom. They were sitting on something like 24 points. They'd only won something like, I think it was 5 wins or something they had won. And I could tell that there was ability in the squad. It was a very young squad. There's no doubt there was a lot of good players in that squad. But certainly the Manchester City result was a fantastic result. It was a very good performance. But at the same time, too, the only thing that concerned me was that this club was in a very dramatic relegation battle, and we had a tremendous fight in our hands to make sure that we tried to do all we could to keep that club in the division and help get these young players more confident and help to get them better. But it certainly was, as I said earlier, Reece, it certainly was a great performance and a very good result.
Yeah, I remember that Bristol City game, that 3-2 when Blackstock scored in the last minute. That always sticks in my mind as kind of the day where it obviously helped us get over the line. And I believe, if I can remember this correctly, we was outside the relegation zone and Norwich lost, which meant we were safe, and that relegated them. So, yeah, that Blackstock game always fingers in my mind, that Bristol City one.
Yeah, there certainly was. I can't remember how many games there was left, but certainly every single game, as you can imagine, was a cup final. I remember stepping on the training ground in the first morning, and it became clear to me that you know, and don't forget, guys, I think there was about over £5 million spent before I came in on two players particularly. I think it was Robert Earnshaw, and the other one was another striker, I think it was.
Yeah, Joe Garner.
Joe Garner, that's correct. Yeah, there was Joe, and there was Ernie, I think Guy Moussi was bought, and also Joe Lynch was bought. And so, no, there was a bit of money spent before we came in, over £5 million. And unfortunately, as you could see, that there was certainly, I felt moving into the first training session, there was a lot of energy, a lot of pace, a lot of ability, but it certainly lacked a bit of discipline.
I think that ties in quite nicely with my first question, Billy, actually. I think fast forwarding to your first kind of pre-season, one of the most intriguing signings I thought was the decision to bring Paul McKenna in. was like that real focal point in the middle of the pitch, a leader, if you like, of men. Was that kind of something that you identified pretty early on when you took the Forest job?
Well, we had a very young squad, didn't we? I mean, the squad was a very young squad, and one of the things that we had to try and do was obviously add a little bit of experience, not just experience, but somebody that could move people around on the pitch. And Kenna was certainly one of these guys. He was a good talker. He was a very good communicator with his teammates, and he certainly didn't miss anybody when people, if you like, dropped runners or didn't match 1-2s or didn't do their job properly. So I think the Paul McKenna one was very, very important. But as you know, I think we brought in, was it 8 signings we brought in the summer? And amongst those signings, we had obviously Kenna, David McGoldrick, Paul Anderson, and people like that. So there was a whole range of people brought in. But certainly Kenna was very, very important. 1, because of his leadership. 2, because of his communications and that communication skill to other teammates. And then, of course, 3, the way that he linked the play and brought other people into the game.
Obviously, one of those people that would have come into the game would have been Radamajewski, who was also signed that summer. I mean, how did he come in sort of your radar, really? Obviously, him playing his trade in Poland, I've better say he's definitely one of the most loved sort of continental recruits, if you like. Obviously, I still remember, I can't remember if it was his debut or not, that Derby game where you just crashed one in off the bar from like 25 yards out within like the first 3 minutes. Like, what a way to endear yourself to the home support. But yeah, how did he sort of come across your radar? Because that seemed like a very out the blue signing, like and really immense scouting, really.
No, what you've got to do, Christian, when you go into a club, obviously they've got their scouting department, and then as a manager, I then go in with all my staff and our contacts and all the people that we know in the game, and there's no doubt that the scouting department had identified Radamajewski as a potential. I think he was out of favour at his club. There was a lot of rumour about off-field nonsense and the usual stuff that you hear about with players. We brought Raddy in on loan. I think it was 150 grand to begin with. Raddy came in, and from day one, he was just a fantastic lad to work with. He's great energy. A real fun type guy with his teammates as well. He was right in the heart of all the jokes and all the carry-ons, which was great. And Raddy came into the club. He fitted in beautifully with the rest of the squad, and he certainly scored some wonderful goals and brought some wonderful memories for us.
Yeah, so following on, Billy, I mean, we had a really good first half of the season that season. As Christian mentioned, Majewski's goal against Derby beat them 3-2 at home. The Newcastle game at home when Dexter Blackstock scored stays in my mind. A couple of highlights in that first half of the season. But I think the performance what probably tops it all from that first half of that season was the West Brom away one. Maybe because it was obviously such a good performance, but also the snowy and icy conditions as well. One player from that side who does get mentioned a fair bit is Nicky Shorey. Do you think if we could have got him for the full season, then we could have got promoted in the top 2?
Well, you've got to remember at the time, the West Brom performance was first class, as you can remember, beating 3-1, I think it was. And we played some wonderful football that night. But what was important, that window was very important. I think that was the start of January when we played West Brom.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I think that result moved us into second place. And then the January window became very, very important. Now, we had Nicky Shorey, and we knew what the fee was to bring Nicky Shorey into the club in relation to the extension of the loan. And it was just a couple of $100,000. But I remember having a chat with Nigel Doughty, and Nigel told me that he had been advised by his advisors inside the club that we should wait to the last week of the window because we'll get him cheaper. Now, I said to Nigel quite clearly, Nigel, the prize is too big. Pay what we need to pay. We've got this lad in the building. He's played 9 games for Forest. We haven't lost a game since he's been in the club. The club is flying high. There's no need to mend something that's not broken, and there's no need to risk something that we don't need to risk. So I certainly made it clear to Nigel that I felt that waiting was not necessary. We've got him in the building, get him tied up, get him in the door, pay the fee that's been asked for. I think it was from Aston Villa at the time. And somebody much more clever than me advised Nigel that they felt that the best thing to do was to wait till the last week of the window. Unfortunately for us, I think it was the Fulham left back that took an injury in training. Bridges, it might have been, I can't remember. I think it may have been Bridges, Wayne Bridges, maybe, can't remember. But this left back took an injury. And lo and behold, what happened next was that Fulham then came in and took Nicky Shorey from under our feet. What's very interesting, guys, about this whole Nicky Shorey situation, as I said to you before, club was flying, second in the league, 9 games with Shorey in the team, no losses. We're in a very, very strong position. Once the window had closed, Nigel had made the call to me, and the first thing that Nigel said to me was, I want to apologise. We have completely messed up in the January window. And that's exactly what happened with the Nicky Shorey situation.
That leads me to follow on well, because obviously not long later we lost at Derby. I think it was Robert Horse's header, I think. We were unbeaten away all season up until that point. And I believe we was also 19, I think it was, unbeaten. We obviously then didn't win on the road again all season after that. I mean, can you put your finger on why that kind of happened, from being so good away to not winning again?
Well, I think a number of things happened. Newcastle at the time signed 6 players. West Brom signed 5. There was 2 clubs, I think, in administration that never signed any players. And the only other club that didn't sign a signing was Nottingham Forest in second place. I think the morale of the dressing room was hit hard when we lost Nicky Shorey. I think he was such an important balancing player for this club. I think there was a complete kick in the backside to the dressing room, to the staff. And by not signing players, guys, in that January window, by allowing Nicky to get out there, I just think it had a very, very bad reaction within the dressing room in the club. And then, of course, we then go, and with no signings and with Shorey leaving the club, etc., I've always said, and I think I said publicly at the time, from that point on, we were on a decline to the end of the season.
No, it was weird because it seemed to be. I even remember the last game against Scunthorpe. We went 2-0 up and drew that, didn't we? I seem to remember. Like, just for whatever reason, we seemed to be pretty all right at home despite all the adversity, but away from home, just for whatever reason, what didn't stick. But regardless, we went into the playoffs for the first time since the 02-03 season. We were third, 9 points clear of Blackpool, I think it was. Obviously, what did you make of that encounter against? Obviously, it was a pretty solid Blackpool side. It was one that got 39 points in the Prem the year after, to be fair to them. And you had people like Charlie Adam, DJ Campbell. Let's not go from Forest nemesis is past and present, really. And but a more brighter note was David Vaughan, who obviously we really liked at Forest. But what did you make of that side that we came up against? And did you think that over 2 legs we could get through and sort of show that we were 9 points better off over the course of a 46-game season?
Well, the 9 points better off. This is a club that went on to get into the Premier League for the first time since 1971. So that tells you, even though you're 9 points better off, this Blackpool team, I think, had a voodoo over us all season. And there was one particular game where I mentioned it, I remember at the City Ground, where we absolutely pummeled them. And I think it was Charlie Adam who scored a goal from the edge of the box into the bottom left corner, if I remember right. But we absolutely battered them that game. So getting into the playoffs, the 9 points mattered not to us. What we felt all the time was that you don't go through the season and get to the playoffs if you're a bad side. Blackpool had good players. DJ Campbell's and Charlie Adams and David Vaughan's and Scott Dobies and all these other guys. They had a fantastic squad of players. A bit like at the minute, you look at Newcastle in the Premier League and they tend to underplay their hand, Newcastle. Nobody really talks them up. Nobody thinks they're going to be anything special. They've spent a lot of money, but they've kept under the radar. And they've got a hell of a squad and they've spent a hell of a lot of money. But it was similar to Blackpool. Blackpool, everybody thought was this easy pushover. And a club that didn't spend a lot of money in relation to transfers, but certainly brought in some great players. So we certainly went into the first game, guys. I've said it before, in that game, their keeper was excellent. Gilts at the time, he was excellent. We go and we have some great chances. We hit the bar. Their keeper pulls off a wonder save from Chris Cohen to make it 2-2. He tips it round the corner. But all in all, that first game was very frustrating, very difficult place to play, Blackpool. But overall, I've got to say that on the night, it could have went either way. It was a tough match. And it certainly was a typical Blackpool game at Blackpool.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, to be fair, with the whole Blackpool situation and the players they had. I mean, they were a bit of a underestimated quantity, I think, that season. I mean, just to tie in with Shorey a little bit, this question, I guess, was there one player who, for the second half of that season, if we had managed to bring in, might have pushed us over the line as an alternative to Shorey? Now, the reason I asked that, Billy, is obviously I'm not sure if you saw Kyle Walker's podcast. He claimed that Gareth Bale actually told him he was on his way to Forest before. I think it was it Asu Akoto, was it, the Cameroonian guy? He got injured, and then obviously Bale, well, the rest is history. I mean, was that a particular deal that you look back at with a tinge of sadness that it didn't come off and get us over the line a little bit?
Well, there was no deal. It was a Nigel Doughty pipe dream. And I remember getting a call from Nigel. I got an email from Nigel asking me the question, what's your thoughts on Gareth Bale? Now, I went back and I said to Nigel quite simply, of course, yeah, if we can get this guy in, let's get him in. What then happened after that is I then got instruction from the chairman. Can't remember if it was a call or an email. Basically telling me that he wanted me to drive to London to go and speak to Harry Redknapp in Tottenham about concluding the deal for Gareth Bale. 2 days later, if I remember right, I get another contact from Nigel to tell me, don't bother going down to London. David Pleat's going to go down to London and speak to Harry. David Pleat knows Tottenham very well, and just leave it to David Pleat. Now, David Pleat, and I don't know if you know, guys, but David had the final say on all transfers in and out. All transfers, loans, signings, entries and exits had to be run past David. And then what happened after that, I then got a call or message from Nigel at the time to tell me that the Bale deal is not happening as it's too rich for us. And that's how the Gareth Bale thing dropped.
Well, I mean, the season after, Billy, you got us to another playoffs, and this time we came up against Swansea. I think we were at the other end this time, weren't we? We finished sixth, got in on the last day as Blackpool did the season before. Obviously, Swansea finishing third. Obviously, in the first leg, did the red card of Neil Taylor, because it happened so early in the game, did that kind of hamper us in the sense that it changed the game plan? And what was the reasoning in the second leg why you opted to go with McGoldrick and Tudgate over Earnshaw and Chris Boyd?
Some have said to me that I should have started with McGoldrick and Tudgate in the first game.
Okay.
Because we would have won the game.
Okay.
Some said that Alec Ferguson in the European Cup final should have started with Solskjaer.
Yeah, and Sheringham, yeah.
Some say. So it's okay. Hindsight's great. You can turn around and say here that maybe if we played Tudgate and David McGoldrick, maybe Marcus Tudgate might have scored 2 goals like he did against Derby at the City Ground, and maybe he was the better option for the first leg. And maybe we should have kept Boydie and Ernie for the second leg. I'm now saying to you quite simply that you know, we played Boydie and we played Ernie in the first game. They go down to 10 men. Maybe, as it's been suggested to me by some Forest fans, maybe the vision of David McGoldrick and the tricks of McGoldrick with a more powerful, aggressive Marcus Tudgate at home might have been a better option when Swansea went down to 10 men because of how deep they sat and because of how they played. Maybe having the 2 box players that couldn't get the space or find the space or do what they done, maybe that's, again, you can argue for or against. I don't believe that, because I certainly believe in the first game, the 10 men didn't help us. They did sit very deep. We did start with Robert Earnshaw and Chris Boyd. We then go to Swansea for the second leg. We're playing against a team with fantastic counter pace, counter attack, a team of high possession, a team that could really put that ball around, and their stats at home were excellent. And I felt away from home it was more important for us to play with this one up with Tudgay and with one off in David McGoldrick, who incidentally, if he did score in the first half and didn't hit the bar, and we did win 1-0, my managerial ability would have been through the roof at that point because things would have been different. So I've got to say, guys, I think the performance in the second leg was excellent. It's we've hit the bar, we've hit the post, we've got a penalty, Stonewall penalty denied. I've said on record, Brendan Rodgers did say after the game and was quoted that would have been a fantastic final. I did say on record that Brendan did say to me on the touchline that he was very, very, very complimentary on my performance. He did say that he felt they were a bit fortunate. He did say that we deserved to win the match, which we did. And he was very complimentary to the performance, particularly in the second half. So, like Alec Ferguson, when people say that Solskjaer came on in the 92nd minute and wins the game, like the first leg where people say to me, Forest fans said, you don't think you might have been better playing with McGoldrick and Tudgay rather than the 18-yard box, 6-yard box strikers and Earnshaw and Boyd? I've got to say, we sit down with many staff. We look at many stats. We look at the situation with sports science and medical and all sorts. And we come to decisions that we feel is right for the club. And as I said before, nobody can tell me that starting with Boyd and Ernie in the first game was the right thing to do, but not starting with Ernie and Boyd in the second leg, was the wrong thing to do, because either way it could have went anyway. We were unfortunate. We played very well, and we deserved to win the match, and that's the bottom line.
No, I would agree with that. I think out of the two playoffs that we had in the year, I think the Swansea one hurt the most as a fan, just because with the Blackpool game, it was a bit of sort of like, okay, fair enough. Like they're the better team over two legs. It happens. You move on. But in the Swansea game, I mean, you hit the wood framework 4 times. Like it just felt like that. It was like there was a curse against us that moment in time. It was horrible, and it's one that sort of lasted another 12 years or so. But in your opinion, I mean, which one of those two sort of rankled you most as a manager? Just because, was it losing to a team that, like as we said, a very good Blackpool side, but one that we're better than over the course of the season, or one that we really had the better chances which couldn't put away? I suppose you could throw in the even under for Wales when we missed out to Leicester on the final day of the season. Which one of those three do you think really sort of hurt most as a manager?
Well, I think the Blackpool thing, I said to you, we're on decline for January. We always felt that there was tremendous mistakes made, and that was admitted by the chairman at the time, who apologised for what was done or not done in January. The Blackpool thing was, I always felt, was a voodoo. The amount of times we played against them at Blackpool, as I said before, that we could have easily have scored another goal or two because of the goalkeeper's performance. We hit the bar with Dexter. Chrissy Cohen's shot for the edge of the box. You look at these things and you think maybe it might have been different. The second leg, again, if I remember right, I'm sure that Ernie could have had a penalty. It was a great call for a penalty kick by Ernie. Dexter Blackstock went through in 1-on-1. It was called offside. Scott Dobie scores with a deflected goal, a deflected shot to make it 2-2. And then they go and hit us on the counter-attack and do what they do. So I always felt that the Blackpool game, we should not underestimate Blackpool. They were a very good team. They had a very good manager. And at the end of the day, I think it was written in the stars for them to make it that year. The Swansea thing was slightly different. This was a real quality side that we're playing against. It was unfortunate for them to lose a man after 10 minutes, because I think that certainly changed the way the game was going to be played. And it was important for us to try and get at them in the second half, which we did, but we just couldn't get that goal or two, whatever it may be. Second leg, I've got to say, anybody that watches the game, I'm sure you would agree it was a great performance. It was very unfortunate. They definitely deserved X, Y, and Z or whatever. But no, I've got to say, guys, I don't separate any of the two of them. I just think the two playoff games, and I look at both of them, I think there's a lot of pluses and minuses in relation to what happened with young Brendan Maloney at left back, I remember right. Young Brendan came in, young boy. He thought he handled himself really well under very difficult circumstances. So again, with James Perchett left back against Blackpool, these guys, none of these guys ever get played in a position they're not comfortable with, or they don't, after meetings with me and chats with me, they don't confirm that they're more than happy to play in these positions. So, at that point, after losing Shorey, then we had to go with Perchie. And then, of course, in the Swansea situation, we went with, I'm sure it was young Brendan Maloney. But I don't separate them. It was a fantastic achievement. It was a great performance. Some wonderful stats broken over the season. And we done not too bad for the 7 million spend that we brought in with the 8 players and so to get to the playoffs and do what we've done.
Yeah, I'm going to move things on from the playoff heartaches now. I'm going to start crying again in a minute. One player that I loved watching when you were manager, Billy, was Lewis McGugan. And it felt like at times with him on the pitch, it was just a bit of a cheat code, to be fair, at championship level. Would you say that he's probably the most technically gifted player that you've ever managed, ever?
No, I don't think. I wouldn't say that he's the most technical, because I've dealt with a lot of very good players. But what this young lad had was he had an ability to go and score goals from very, very difficult places and great options of whatever he'd done. He was just an extremely good player with great ability, a wonderful awareness of skill and passing, but more importantly, from a set play or from the edge of the box, this lad can certainly score some wonderful, wonderful goals. And he was an absolute joy to work with.
Who would you say was the most technically gifted player you managed then?
Well, I've got to say that I look at all the clubs. There's been some real talented players at every single club. I don't think I could single out one player at every club to say that he's the most technical. For example, there was a young lad called Giles Barnes that played with Derby. He was also very, very similar to Big Louis, a very talented young player. We had many, many senior players, tremendous players at Preston, Derby and Forest over the years that had fantastic ability. But having said that, these young boys with great ability also had those little flaws in their game where other people complemented their flaws, and that's what made us a good side.
Another player that seemed to be pretty magical under your management was Lee Camp, who it just felt at times like you'd watch Forest and just know that we weren't going to concede, because if they somehow, like obviously in that first season when it was Morgan and Wilson, if someone got through them, it was like, we're not going to beat Camp. And even the second season as well, when it was Chambers there, it felt exactly the same way. But obviously, I'm sure you remember the game against Reading, where obviously he made 2 wonder saves in like the space of a minute and the whole crowd singing England's #1. And it sort of got a bit of momentum, didn't it? The whole, won't he play for England? And obviously he ended up going for Northern Ireland in the end. But there was quite a bit of in the press and the media about, speculation that Camp might get in as like third choice keeper. So I know there was a bit of a weird time. I remember Frank Fielding being third choice keeper for England at one point in that sort of spell. So it's sort of like, well, Camp's definitely better. Was there actually any serious momentum about Camp getting an England squad, or was it just media noise?
No, I remember at the time his performance was deserved of the if you like, all the recommendations that he was getting and the compliments he was getting, because not only his goalkeeping performances, but as a character, he was a real character, a bit like McKenna, as we said earlier on. And we certainly had a huge number of characters that were very influential within the team in the dressing room. Campy was one of those, where he was just a very opinionated player, a fantastic player to work with, didn't miss anybody in the training ground when people weren't stopping shots, winning headers, or whatever it may be. The type of guy that you want in your team, the type of character you want in your club. And any decision on the international stuff, we had a chat about, but it was always down to him and his family. We always felt that him and his family should decide what they feel is best for their career. And there certainly was this speculation about England. And then, of course, the Irish thing. But very much justified, guys. A fantastic player for this club. A great leader, a great character. And certainly someone that deserved everything he got because of his performance.
No, I remember, I think my favourite example of his leadership, we had Leeds, I think we drew 1-1, and I remember he got a bang on the head. Like it was very brave. He put his head in where a foot was and needed medical treatment, and like blood pouring down his face, like Terry Butcher-esque. I remember he had like blood dripping down. He sort of took some blood and just pointed it at the Forest badge in front of the Leeds fans, and like everyone just went mental. It was just like what a way to get the crowd up on your side. Like he was so good having him at the club, honestly.
Well, that's a great thing about very similar to Andy Gorham, who I had at Motherwell. A fantastic goalkeeper that when you went to Celtic Park or you went to Ibrox or you went to these big clubs, then these guys stood out. Campy was the same. No matter what ground we went to at Forest and no matter what the crowd was, this guy just knew how confident he was, and he knew how to go and get at his teammates in the dressing room. He knew how to handle himself during the game. And I've got to say, people like him are very much vastly important to the success of our club. And it certainly was a joy. It was a joy to work with Campy, along with many, many others.
I mean, myself, and I'm sure Christian, Lee and Adam will agree with me. We feel you managed us during that peak rivalry Derby, because there was yourself, who obviously used to manage Derby, Nathan Tyson, we'll speak about him in a minute. Obviously, Lee Camp, as we just mentioned, he obviously was at Derby, and before you come in, Billy, I'm not sure if you're aware, he saved the penalty at Derby under Colin Caldwell, which kind of endeared him to us. Obviously, Robbie Earnshaw had come from Derby to Forest. And then you've got on the other end, down the A52, Nigel Clough was their manager, who obviously was a Forest legend, post-war top scorer, obviously son of Brian. Chris Commons, who was a Forest fan, who'd left Forest to go to Derby on a free. And of course, that man, Mr. Robbie Savage as well. So all of them pantomime villains, plus obviously others and that in the mix. How much did you enjoy them battles with Nigel and Derby? And what did you say to Nathan Tyson after the famous corner flag incident?
Well, let me get to Tyson first. I said to Tyson that for the first time in my life, I've seen something that's got less body fat than that you had, the flagpole. That's the first thing I said to Tyson. I says, Tyson, I couldn't believe it. How did you manage to pick the flagpole up, and how did you manage to carry that flagpole that had less body fat than you had? It was just remarkable to see him running across that pitch. But no, the Derby thing, I've got to say, boys, the Derby thing, it's always great playing in these rivalries. It's always a fantastic atmosphere. You know that it's always going to kick off at some point, home and away. And it certainly did with the names that you mentioned, Reese. Then there's absolutely no doubt. There's not many shy ones amongst those names, is there? There certainly is a lot of personality. There's a lot of character, and there's a lot of big mouths as well that love to hear their own voice. So I've got to say that I thoroughly enjoyed the Derby games. I thoroughly enjoyed the competitions home and away. And I'm sure you want to get to the bane of my life, the 5-0 game when I left Forest the second time. I've got to say that one is hard to swallow, because of the imbalance of their strength against us being completely weaknessed with the amount of players we had out injured and missing. But the Derby games were fantastic, and we had some very memorable times.
Yeah, because in the it's more the first, or definitely the first spell, because we lost to them in the league when you come in for half the season. We lost to them in the FA Cup, which obviously started the old Tyson thing, didn't it? With Robbie Savage waving the scarf in front of their fans. I can remember that. Obviously, then the season after, we beat them 3-2 at home. We'd then gone to Pride Park and lost 1-0. Then the season after, we've obviously beat them 5-2. We beat them 1-0 away, which was like in a weird kind of month, wasn't it? I think it was back end of December and like back end of January, which was a bit odd. And then obviously when you come in for your second spell, Billy, also the Jack Hobbs winner, 1-0. So yeah, I absolutely love them, and because there was proper ding-dongs. And to be fair, we both had a share of successes. Obviously recently, we've not played Derby for a while now, but they haven't beat us for a long time, even when, we was in the Championship with them. So they were brilliant games. It really was.
Yeah, they were very special, weren't they? The atmosphere was special, and they were great encounters home and away, and we certainly had some tremendous memories playing against them. I've got, as I said to you before, they're just a pleasure to be involved in. And when you get into professional football, these are the type of games that you want to be involved in. These are the type of matches that you want your players and your staff to be involved in. And it was just great, the ones that we did go and get those results. It was obviously great memories and fantastic occasions.
Can I just jump in there? Just since you mentioned the 5-0, Billy, it's just a question that popped into my head. When you know you're going to a game like that with lots of injuries and the squad's going to be considerably weaker, is your message to the players in the changing room still the same as if you've got your full strength 11, or do you have to almost kind of tweak your team talk and what you say to them because you know that they've not been in the side and they are up against it from the off sort of thing?
Lee, I said to Max that let's not underestimate the injuries that we had, and funny enough, I printed it off for you because I want you to be quite sure what we had here. We had 10 serious injuries going into this derby game. We did have 2 very strange pullouts on the Tuesday and the Thursday, one with an ankle and another one with an illness. Very, very strange pullouts from these 2 players, which made it 10 missing. We had Lehigh with a double hernia. We had Hobbs with a stress-fractured ankle. We had Wilson with a prolapsed disc. We had Cohen with an ACL tear. We had David Vaughan fractured kneecap. Henry Lansbury fractured back. Andy Reid, hernia operation. Abdun, who was ill. Blackstock, a micro fracture in his knee. And Jabor with an ankle issue. So I've got to say to you, before we talk about the 5 game, or the 5-0 game, let's not underestimate this amount of quality and first team starters that was missing. The decision that I had, I actually thought about playing one of our young boys who I put on the bench, young Ben. I thought about playing him for the start, and I didn't want to expose him. And that's why I had to pull in Jonathan Greening, our coach, because I certainly did not want to expose a young player in a very weakened side. It concerned me. But I do remember meeting Fawaz on the Friday before the derby. Fawaz came in and said to me, Billy, I can pick your team tomorrow. There's nothing you can do. You've got no other option. And at the end of the day, here's your team. And Fawaz gave me his team, which was 99% correct because we didn't have an option. But I've got to say, guys, that was a hard one to swallow. Steve McLaren was very polite, as I said on Max's show. But at the same time, too, if you just look at that list of players, you know, there was 10 serious injuries. We were 2 points outside the playoffs with 9 games remaining. And I did say that Fawaz was a fool making the decision that he made because he listened to the wrong people. Because, as I said earlier, my record over a full season at Preston, it was 5th and 4th place with 75 and 80 points. At Derby, it was 3rd place with 84 points. At Forest 1, it was 3rd place with 79 and 6th place with 77 points. And then, of course, Forest 2 with Fawaz Al-Assawi. He should have known to leave me a full season, because if he had left me for a full season, we would have got to the playoffs. But the amount of people that we had lost, the amount of people that was injured made us very, very weak, and they got us at the best time they could ever get us. And that's why I said to Max, I was very disappointed in the Forest fans about this Is What It Is song, because I certainly felt there was a lack of understanding, a lack of consideration to the situation that we faced, and we certainly were not out of it. I certainly felt that if we could be left for the full season, and Fawaz did apologise when he tried to bring me back to the club on 2 occasions thereafter, that he made a huge mistake, listened to the wrong people, and I certainly believe we would have got him to the playoffs again.
On a more sort of positive sort of manageable thing, obviously we'll cover the 5-0 and the fallout that in great depth, I'm sure. But I just thinking back to obviously the games that we talked about before the bad stuff. And I remember that season when we beat Derby twice, the 2010-11 season, Dean Moxey was booked for nearly decapitating Aaron Ramsey at City Grounds. Then we played Derby at Pride Park. He got sent off straight red for going straight for the back of Earnshaw. Last day of that season at Crystal Palace, who'd moved to January, he gets sent off again for this wiping out Tudgay. Was that something that you tapped into? Did you sort of say to players, he's got a hot head, he'll make a foul, get on him sort of thing? Or did that just sort of play out naturally?
You know I'm not that type of manager, Christian.
I wouldn't suggest anything. I'm just asking a question.
No, I think what you do is that when you're sitting down and you're facing opposition, like they do with us, they'll identify one or two things on our side that they feel maybe a weakness or a strength or whatever it may be. We certainly do the exact same thing, but I've got to say, no, definitely not. We certainly did not identify or target anybody that we felt, to try and get him ordered off or whatever. We identified strengths and weaknesses on their side, but the most important factor for us was to play towards our strength and play the game that we played and stick to the principles and the way that we went about our business. That was always more important to me. Although you have to look at opposition and you have to address many factors from set plays to formations to strengths and weaknesses of individuals. But for me, the most important thing in my time at Forest was always trying to get the best out of the players that we had, always trying to get the team playing to its maximum potential. And I felt if we could do that, then we would certainly win games of football.
I don't want to dwell on that 5-0 too long because I just don't. It's them. To be fair, I will give them credit as well, Billy. They had a great team that season, Derby. That was the QPR season, wasn't it? When they lost in the Cloud final, which was obviously enjoyable for us. But that is one of the only Forest Derby games I missed. I couldn't have got a ticket for that game for some reason. But so from the fans' perspective, and I get what you're saying about the situation, but that's probably because it's Derby and there's a bit of frustration and that. But so do you think even with the injury list you just mentioned, with 9 games to go, and like you said, 2 points off the plough, was you still vastly confident of just getting us in there?
We always were, Reece. I've got to tell you, although we knew about the injury list and it was quite severe, as I read out to you. We always
players
knew,
on that list.
Well, listen, if you look at the quality it's on that list and the first team starters and the type of injury, you're not talking about a little calf strain, or you're talking about serious injuries. But even with that, I was always very confident that we could. I think 1 or 2 of these guys was coming back in the next week or two. I can't remember. But I always felt very confident. And history proved that. If you leave me a season, then the least you'll get is a playoff semi-final and 78 points or whatever it may be per season. So we were confident. What we needed was a calm head. What we needed was people to just understand what it's all about, not panic. And unfortunately, I think the inexperience that was shown, and also the stupidity that was shown by making a move that was eventually told to me was made because it listened to the wrong people. I think that move was a wrong thing. I certainly believe, Reece, that if we did stay where we were, then history proved that we would have got to the playoffs. Of that, there is no doubt.
You obviously mentioned with Max about Fawaz asking to come back. How come that didn't materialise in the end?
Well, it was very interesting because and I was asked the question by Max, how did I end up at Forest the second time? And I ended up at Forest the second time because of a whole range of different situations that I'll go into with you at a later date, not just now. But I find myself going down to London to speak to Fawaz. Fawaz then tells me about all the removals that he was making. He told me about what was happening with his club. He told me about the behaviour and conduct of certain staff members and employees that he was thinking about changing. And then after a meeting or two, I can't quite remember, he asked me to come back as manager. He did tell me that he did try to get me back as soon as he took over the club. But there was a certain board member at Forest that convinced him that he should not make that move. And it was very much against what he wanted to do. But he was certainly misdirected or misinformed about not bringing me back as soon as he took over the club. So it was an interesting call, it was an interesting meeting. And I certainly had no hesitation in coming back to Forest the second time.
Yeah, I have to say, Billy, I mean, just moving on to sort of what you're up to now, I have to say I'm a little bit surprised that since you left Forest that second time that you've not been given an opportunity somewhere else. And obviously you said at the start that you are keen to get back in, but I was just wondering kind of A, what the process is when you're an out of work manager. Is there lots of applications going in? And B, I guess, what sort of level are you kind of looking to get back in? Is it a case of have boots, will travel wherever, or are you looking for something in the UK? I just wondered what the process was when you're out of work, basically.
Well, Lee, what happened was there was a whole range of things. First of all, I found myself in a very long-standing dispute with the previous owner of Nottingham Forest. And in addition to that, I've got to say, I was horrendously advised by people that should have known better. And those people that should have advised better were more on the off-field rather than on-field. It was off-field advice by people that should have known better. And then there was a whole range of things came in. A pandemic came in, some serious family health issues over a number of years came in. And then all of a sudden, I decided a number of years back that I would start building qualification. I wanted to go back and learn about a whole range of subjects, from women's football and disability football. I went to Liverpool University to do a diploma in football management. I started to go to all the games in north and south of the border. I started to go abroad to club visits and do all the club visits. And I've got to say, Lee, at that point, I started to get my appetite back, my hunger back, my passion back. And over the last number of years, I have been available. I have been very keen to get back in. That $1 million question that you asked, Lee, that will be answered in due course. But at the minute, all I can say to you is I can't wait to get back on the training ground. I'm ready, I'm fit, I'm available, and very passionate to go back on and back on working with players and teams.
I mean, I wish you all the best of it. I think when you look at some of the managers that are still getting jobs, I think you look at your track record, particularly at the second tier level. I think, like I say, I'm a little bit surprised you've not been given a chance somewhere else. My final question, Billy, to be honest, is just a bit of a light-hearted one. I just wondered what your favourite game as Forest manager was during either of your two spells at the club.
I would probably say to you that I think Watford in the midweek, when I made 3 substitutions and the 3 of them scored, that was quite a memorable game for me, to be honest with you. And it was a strange night. I'm sure it was Watford midweek, guys. I can't quite remember. But I remember making these 3 substitutions and the 3 of them scored. And obviously I was delighted because the 3 guys went on, the 3 guys scored the goal. And it was a very, very good turnaround of performance and result. And that is one of many. Obviously, the West Brom away and Derby games, and there's so many games that you can pick out, Lee, as you can imagine. But certainly, I think the Watford one was quite a memorable game in the way the game was going, and then of course the way the game finished.
Obviously, your CV speaks for itself, Billy, but one of the things that I think would really, from our point of view, stands out is the year of 2010, where Forest went a whole calendar year unbeaten at home. How does that rank in your achievements of being a manager? Because that to do that at any level is incredibly impressive, but to do it in a championship where it's such a frenetic league where freak results happen all the time, especially midweek for some bizarre reason. But how was that? How did you sort of come to terms with that? That's a pretty special thing to do.
Well, I'm very proud, obviously, when I look at all the clubs, Christian, the Preston North End record, 122 year, equaling what they call the Great Invincibles at Preston, and the records that was broken in. And then going to Derby, we created a whole range of, if you like, great achievements and great records. The Derby County, the Nottingham Forest thing was very special, I've got to tell you. To go, I think it was maybe a year and a half away, or at home or whatever, with that record was fantastic. But I think equaling Brian Clough's 12 consecutive wins, if I remember right. There was a whole range of things at different clubs, Christian. I've got to say, we're very proud. You can't do that unless you've got the right team behind you. I've got a great team of staff that are very successful. We have wonderful, wonderful players to work with, tremendous people at the clubs that we have great relationships with. And all these people, no matter whether it's a bus driver or whether you're Terry the kit man or whether you're the ground staff, all these people contribute great things. And what we've done at every club, in particular at Forest, we created a great spirit, we created a great togetherness, and we certainly we're delighted with the effort that we got, and obviously the stats and the records that we broke. We're very proud of all the achievements that we've done. Let me just say one thing to you guys. There was one thing, it was one of the questions you were going to ask us, and one of the questions I think it was, is there any player that we missed out on that I look back on it could have helped us? Well, that player was Robert Lewandowski. And I think it was June 2010 maybe, or 2009, I can't remember. But certainly Robert Lewandowski was on the radar. We did speak to the scouting department. We were working very hard along with Sam Allardyce and Blackburn in the Premier League, who tried to get him. It was this young 22-year-old that was playing very well with his team. It was getting talked about by a lot of people all over Europe. And I can honestly say to you, if you ask me a question about one player that we would have loved to have brought to Forest, then with the scouting department and the effort that we were making to try and make it work, he's one of the players that I just wish that we could have brought to the club just before all the big boys jumped in, and just before that he made that decision, and a bad decision on a £4.3 million move to Dortmund rather than coming to Nottingham Forest. I think he made a horrendous decision going to that club.
Absolutely. No, it makes me laugh. I think obviously he had the whole Ash Cloud thing, didn't he, with Blackburn or something going there. But yeah, whoever's scouting in Poland for Forest, bloody hell, some finds there with Radi and Lewandowski. It's not bad going. I've got to say though.
Listen, believe it or not, I've got to give credit to Craig Brown, my former manager at or a staff member at Preston and so on. Craig is very, very influential on international games and international players, etc. So I certainly did, in many occasions, speak to Craig about these lads that play with Poland and all these other different countries. And Craig was very, very complimentary, not only to Radi, but also to Lewandowski. He certainly gave me the tick box, if you like. He gave me the rundown before we were trying to gather information. But people like Craig Brown and the experience that they had and the contacts were very helpful, along with a whole range of other people, Christians, you can imagine.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, one thing you mentioned before that was obviously about team spirit, and it doesn't matter what Forest player you seem to listen to from that time you managed, they all say the same thing. They all say that it was a tremendous environment to work with, that you managed to get the best out of them on a personal level, that they all really wanted to play for you. You can see that on the pitch, to be fair. The results told their own story, and the work rate. I mean, you can just see it. Even when things weren't going well, and that, like when you first came in, the effort just seems to just go through the roof when you first walked through the door. Obviously, now Forest are flying high, which is remarkable for us as fans, especially like our age. We haven't really seen this sort of heady days before. And again, it seems to be of a very similar team spirit, as was before with Cooper, really. Obviously, again, team spirit was sort of the core focus to going up and staying up. Obviously, how often do you get to watch Forest now? And do you sort of see a similar team spirit to what you sort of fostered at the time?
Well, I said before that, first of all, you've got to compliment Steve Cooper. Steve Cooper done a fantastic job getting Forest into the Premier League. Now, don't get me wrong, if you look at the 3 years, there has been something like a £400 million spend. I think he's brought in 60 players, 38 players have left the building, but there's been some tremendous investment into the players. Steve Cooper done a fantastic job. I think he was unlucky to leave the club when he did. Nuno came in and done a great job to keep these in the league at that point. I think they finished 16th and 17th in the first 2 seasons, which was a real dogfight. But certainly the investment from the board, which you need at that level, I think the investment of 400 million over 3 years, or roughly 400, whatever it is, I think that amount of turnaround of players over the 3-year period, a lot of contribution for Steve Cooper, I've got to say. Very unlucky at the time he left. Fantastic job, Brian Nuno, to come in. Great investment in players, and also a wonderful team spirit. That's how you win matches. Not just by the Chris Woodses, who's done a great job for you, but also by creating that team spirit, which Nuno has done along with the board and everyone at the club. So they deserve great credit, I think, for, if you like, the support that has been given, the investment that's been given, and also the type of managers and Steve and Nuno that have come in and done fantastic jobs. It really is a great compliment to everyone at the club.
Definitely. What do you make of Nuno's tactics in a minute? Obviously, we're obviously very much enjoying it. But just as a fellow manager, what do you see in how he sort of sets his team up, and do you sort of like what you're seeing from him, sort of thing?
No, I just think you can see that when you spend that type of money, you get that quality of player. And what you see Forest at the minute with real quality players. There's no doubt that the striker, and I said this previously, his goals. He's certainly done some tremendous work to put the club into the top 4 or 3, whatever they are just now. And they're great players in all these different positions. But I think from a squad point of view, there's been tremendous additions, tremendous quality brought in relation to this level of competition that you face. And you're now seeing a Forest that doesn't fear anybody, has now got that belief because of the third season, getting beyond that first and second season, getting into that third season with the confidence and more additions. You can see quite clearly that this is now a club that's more than capable of continuing with this top 6, top 4 clubs in the Premier League because of the quality, because of the spirit, because of the management team, and of course because of a board that's got great support and great investment into the club. It's fantastic to see, and I wish them well. I do believe you'll get to Europe. I do believe you'll finish the season in that position, and I really hope that you guys are looking forward to travelling the world next year in your European competitions.
Dust off the passport and sort of like break a few banks. So I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. And do you still how often do you get to watch Forest? I mean, do you still go to games? I know you obviously said you've been watching games north and south of the border recently for your management thing, but have you been to City Ground until fairly recently? Or are you still,
No, I've not been to City Ground recently. I've certainly been to plenty of games all over the country and club visits and things, but I've not been to the City Ground. I have been invited in February to go to the Arsenal game, which I'll probably end up doing. I'll probably end up going to the Arsenal game. So I've had a nice invitation from the club to go along, and I look forward to that Arsenal game, and I'm sure Forest will turn them over as usual because there's nothing to worry about, let's be honest.
No,
there's absolutely nothing. There's nothing to worry about. But no, I've got to say, guys, I'm looking forward to that. I think it's the 25th of February, maybe.
It's a midweek game, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm delighted to get that invitation. I look forward to that game. Obviously looking forward to the event in Nottingham in February, 20th of February. The roadshow will be very, very interesting. It'll be a fantastic night for the fans. Lots of questions, lots of chat about different things. And I'm sure that they'll thoroughly enjoy that. And I hope to see you four there because somebody's going to be paying out, as we had before the event, before the chat. Somebody's going to be paying out and looking after the rest of us. And I'm looking forward to picking up my reward for you four.
Yeah, obviously because Christian's just had spoke about that unbeaten run. I think it was 36 unbeaten at home, if I'm not mistaken. And then the Watford game you mentioned, Billy, was weird. I'm sure it was weirdly on a Thursday night for some reason. We went 2-0 down and come back to 4-2. Adam put that in the comments. Just a final stat for you as well. Obviously, now we've just won 6 games on the bounce. Any idea who's the last Forest manager to do that before Nuno?
I would think as a shit manager at some point in the past has managed to get
So obviously, yeah. So it was yourself. So we've got a 6-1 v Huddersfield, which Raddy scored a hat-trick that night. 2-0 away at Charlton, a 1-0 away win at Hillsborough, 1-0 against Ipswich, 3-1 against Wolves, and 2-1 at Hull City. So yeah, you was the last one to do it before Nuno. Obviously, Nuno's run's still ongoing, so we're hoping he can make it 7 and more because we've got Liverpool next. But Lee has mentioned, this is your Lee, about a competition we're going to run to give away 2 VIP tickets to the night. So we'll sort that out on his platforms. Obviously, he's also mentioned about us guys coming, so we hope we can come along. And unless the guys have got anything else for you, are you anything else, guys?
All good from me.
So can I just say, Lee, if you need anything from me in the future, don't hesitate to give us a call or contact me. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. I hope that 1 or 2 of these bits of information help you understand why Gareth Bale didn't end up at Forest, why Lewandowski didn't end up at Forest, why Nicky Shorey didn't end up at Forest, why I was a little bit annoyed at Derby in the 5-0, etc., etc. I think it's important. I always felt over the past number of years that a dignified silence was my best position. But in the future, it's time now to let the guys know what took place and what the situation was. But I'm delighted to chat to you. You gave me some great memories. You gave me some wonderful support. I thank you for that when I was there. The support was first class, and we certainly had a great time at the club. And I'm so proud and so pleased that you are seeing some excellent football, great results, and some wonderful times at the club again. And I wish you well for the rest of the season.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate you coming on, Billy, and giving us your time. And also, Lee, who's really helped out as well. We really do appreciate it. So I really enjoyed it. So thank you for coming on. All right.
Reece, anytime, if you need anything, don't hesitate to get in touch. And hopefully we'll see you at the road show in February. And again, maybe bumping into the Arsenal game, maybe. But anything, well, guys, don't hesitate to come on to us. And it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you very much, Billy.
Thanks, Billy. Cheers.
Reece, all the best. Christian, thank you. All the best.